January 21st, the time is 3 p.m. I'd like to call this Rules Administration and Procedures Committee to order. Clerk, could you please read the roll?
Chairperson Ron Warman.
Here.
Vice Chair Carl Franco.
Here.
Alderman Edward J. Bugg.
Here.
Alderman Dan Barrero.
Here.
Alderwoman Patty Smith.
Here.
5 present.
Thank you. First item on the agenda is approval of minutes, 25-0026, approval of the minutes from Rules, Administration, and Procedures Committee held on January 7th, 2025. Had a motion by Alderman Smith, second by Alderman Bugg. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Item carries 5-0. Clerk, anybody here for public comment?
No one has signed up.
Okay. Next item on the agenda, 25-0068. Consideration for the proposed changes to Section 2-65 of the Code of Ordinances pertaining to Automatic Initiative Funds.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Corporation Counsel Richard Veenstra. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, attached to this Legistar item is a concept ordinance that reflects many of the changes that the committee discussed last week with respect, or 2 weeks ago, with respect to Section 265 of the City Code pertaining to aldermanic initiative funds. In summary, the use of capital funds has now been expanded to include what we're referring to as public works projects, which would be fixed works paid for by city funds as part of grant programs, not actually performed by the city. This would allow for the use of capital funds for things like facade improvement and grant programs, as well as solar panel programs. The use of capital funds is expanded, at least in this concept, to cover one waste disposal recycling event and award in any given year. The capital funds would be used to pay for the cost of the recycler or waste disposal engaged to conduct the recycle event or shred event or waste event. Additionally, capital funds can be used to pay for the postage of one ward-wide mailer per year, as long as the mailer contains some information and some amount about the capital grant programs or waste events. In other words, things that are covered by capital funds. Non-capital funds may be spent for any purpose that capital funds could be spent for. So this will eliminate a step that would have ordinarily required a budget transfer for non-capital funds to move in the capital. So that step is eliminated. Existing funds for 2025 will be reallocated 50-50, so the capital pot would be the same amount this year as the non-capital. Future allocations would be determined as part of the budgeting process. And the grandfathered accumulated ward funds, which had previously indicated for funds appropriated prior to the year 2024, will include 2024, so that will cover last year's, the lag with last year, given when we enacted 265. So that's at least the concept that's before you right now. You're free to take whatever action you see fit on it. With respect to the title that's on the agenda, that is something that you could advance to COW at your discretion. If you'd like to consider further amendments or other changes to the language, that's something you're able to do today as well. Or if you just want to mull it for an additional 2 weeks, that's certainly within the committee's discretion as well.
Great. Thank you. Questions?
Yes.
Alderman Smith?
Okay. I think I shared my question when I walked through the room with everyone. The portion about the mailers, let's see, what line is that on? That is D, page 5. I do agree that there needs to be, is this the mailer? Is this the mailer? This is, yeah. I do agree that there needs to be something in the mailer that is ward-related. In other words, it can't be Merry Christmas or, Happy 4th of July or something like that. It needs to be information to our wards. But I don't understand the need for the one time, because if I decide, I've always done one time, I do a newsletter mailer, and then sometimes postcards, which shouldn't fall under the same category. But what if I decide I need to do a second mailer? I don't know why. What's the verbiage behind the one time?
You're able to do as many mailers as you have the total budget for. What this allows is for you to pay for the postage of any mailing that includes any reference to a capital program. So if you were doing a newsletter that included also Happy Holidays message as well, but also previewed next year's grant program for capital projects, the entire postage for that newsletter could be paid for with capital funds. So it is allowing you to use capital funds in a way that have never been used before to offset the cost of postage, even if that mailing includes additional information unrelated to capital. So as long as you have that capital nexus in there, you can use capital funds once for one ward-wide mailer. You still have your additional funds, your non-capital funds, to use for other postage and printing costs as needed. So that one-time limitation only applies to if you're going to use capital funds, and it limits it to postage.
This is such that legal language that I didn't read into when I, yeah. So, for example, every
Sure.
time I do a mailer, my last page is my grant program,
Correct.
what it is, how to, so,
So
There you go.
one time you would be able to pay for the postage
Out of
per
that.
year
Okay.
with capital funds.
The other
If you
time
want to
out.
send anything else, just as you do right now, you would use non-capital.
I take back all those bad things I was thinking about you 10 minutes ago.
Well, you may just want to table them. I'm sure you'll have use for them later.
It's early in the year, yes, I understand. Any other
Thank
questions,
you.
Alderman Smith? Alderman Franco?
So, I know what you're saying, but why one? For example, I do one newsletter, so I'm good with that. I got the grant program in there. But I'm also going to do a mailer for, remind people about the shred event and remind people about the grant program. So those two postcards that go out subsequent, those wouldn't be covered by the capital? Those would have to be the non-capital?
The one mailer, you would be able to use capital for postage. So however, given that the postage for a newsletter is probably more expensive than would be used for a postcard, an alderman would most likely use the postage ability under the capital fund to do the more elaborate mailing that includes references to the capital program, and then would use the non-capital funds for whatever other communication that alderman wanted to use to the ward.
All right, I understand that. Now, my question is,
Why?
why one?
Why?
I mean, I don't remember, I'm not saying it's bad, I just don't remember us discussing that, so that was like a new wrinkle, I guess, unless I missed something.
If there's going to be the separation between capital and non-capital.
Right.
If you didn't have the limitation as to one, it would leave the capital funds open to use for every mailer as long as there was some reference to capital.
Right.
So essentially, this is a way of preventing that type of thing from occurring, because you would potentially, an alderman would have within your discretion the ability to say, every mailer I do is going to have a small little section about capital, therefore I'm going to use postage for capital programs each time. So it's designed to kind of balance that, which we have two pots, we want to respect that there are two pots, but we also want to make sure that there is the ability to get that communication out about capital programs.
So
it's an attempt to
Right, no,
balance.
and I get the philosophy behind the thought process. In my opinion, I have no problem with that. I think this could be one of those things, and I would talk to the group about this, is that, all right, let's see how that works for 1 year with the one. You know, because it's a reasonable thing to put in there.
It's better than it is.
Right, so I personally, I'm like, all right, I can live with that. And then like we said, at the end of the year or so on, we can always amend the document because it just wasn't working, for whatever reason, we didn't see. So I'm glad you explained it, like, I do get it. I just don't, that was one of the things that I don't remember us discussing, but I understand why you would throw it in there.
We didn't discuss.
Yeah,
Yeah, right.
and I will say this is, and Attorney Veenstra and myself had a conversation about this for two reasons I was in support of this, because number one, I can speak for myself, but I got to assume everybody here on this committee doesn't wait for their credit card bill to come in the mail. They do stuff online, they get an email, they go pay, they set up for auto pay. Nobody, I don't know who here still gets a paper delivered to their driveway. They go online, they read things, I feel like at some point, we have to, as a city, move forward with electronic communication, so everybody does it but us. I know, and everybody's gonna say, well, I have people that don't. Okay, so for those 5 or 10% or something like that, some way, somehow, people manage to still get communication. So to me, it's a way to kind of force ourselves into communicating electronically. Number two is I think, again, that we can all sit up here and say that we're not gonna, I don't know if abuse is the right word, but take advantage of sending mailers all the time. I mean, the spirit of the non-capital was just that, non-capital for structured projects and and sidewalks and grant programs and this and that. And at some point, somebody may do mailers every quarter, and then there's zero capital projects going on in their neighborhood, or 5,000 out of the 37.5 if that goes through. So I just feel like there needs to be, maybe if we put something, I like it in there, but maybe we should put something in there that after one, it can come to wrap or finance or something like that. For something like that, I think that's a bit of an overkill, but I don't understand why one, and then we all got by on, you guys anyway, not me, got by on using non-capital funds to communicate before. I just think it's a way to make sure that there's a check and a balance to keep the spirit of what the capital fund is intended for, which is in fact capital projects, so.
So I have one comment, and I'm not disagreeing with anything. I think those are reasonable ideas to go forward. But there's always a reason why people do things. So going digital is great. I don't go digital, I don't put my cleanup day on Facebook or any other social media because I don't want people from Batavia and North Aurora and East Side of Aurora coming in for a Fifth Ward project, which the whole world will know about. So I just do mailers to try to keep it amongst those people. I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but that's why I would probably continue to do mailers just to make sure that I'm not, paying for everybody in the
Else,
western
and,
suburbs.
and that makes
stuff.
100% sense,
Yeah.
but at some point, the transparency I think that we have with that Your Voice and everybody having their individual website, in these letters, direct people to go sign up for the email, for the newsletter. I mean, I use the example of when my kids were in school, there was a line saying, okay, this year, everybody's getting electronic information unless they sign up for paper. So I just think it's a way to grow our database, and we can communicate more frequently. I mean, you can send something every day once you get somebody's email address. That's up to you. Much cheaper to hit send than it is to print and postage and all that kind of stuff too. So, but a valid point for sure, because
But-
I see it already. so.
Alderman at Large, I am going to respectfully
Sure.
agree but disagree with you. My entire neighborhood does an 8-page newsletter once a month, as do most of our neighborhoods around. So, and my constituents, I get such positive feedback because of my newsletter, because they love my newsletter. They like the information it brings them. So I think when you're not the person out there, that was one of the things I ran on was communication, higher level of communication, and they feel that they're getting that in part because of they're getting that newsletter, in the mail. So we're making some concessions here. I guess I would be more apt to want to put in there, something about leave it like this and at the end of the year revisit it rather than to try to give people the option of just sending out mailers. I think we need to be very conscientious of that expenditure, but I don't think me as an alderman, the time that I'm here, I do one newsletter online and I do one newsletter in the mail. I get far more feedback from people when they get it in the mail. So to me, that tells me I'm doing the right thing.
And that makes sense, and I will say, sorry to cut you off, Attorney Beacher, but to me, if you went to somebody and said, I could send something once a week electronically, and it'll cost me whatever the internet costs divided by however many people work here, or I could send you a newsletter twice a year at $15,000, whatever it costs, $15,000. I could spend it on newsletters, or I could spend that on trees, or I could spend that on sidewalks. I would be hard-pressed to think that somebody would rather get something electronically and see a more improvement in their ward than a newsletter. So again, I'm just playing devil's advocate. I think we've kind of stole this half enough, so I
Yeah.
think if anybody on this side has some comments,
I
feel
do.
free. Alderman Bug.
Thank you.
Good luck with that appointment after this, too. So.
All right, yeah. Page 4. So we moved the wording around a little bit. So really what we have here under C, bonded waste disposal or recycling entity does not cover shred, technically. Waste disposal is not shred, recycling is not shred. So definitely the intent was to include shred events, so we need to add that back in. I'll let whoever wants to come up with that wording, I'll let you do that. Page 5. Definitely the intent was not only to cover the cost of postage, which this says, it was to cover the cost of the mailer. This does not
With, With respect to that, it was simpler to come up with a distinction as far as allowing for the postage to apply the entire mailer than it would be to attempt to apportion what portion of the printing costs of a mailer would be attributable to the printing, essentially. The other consideration is with respect to the size of the respective buckets. The capital bucket is getting smaller and the non-capital bucket is getting larger. So as I was drafting that and trying to kind of look at what considerations an alderman might make when attempting to figure out how to balance the costs, there is a reality that the capital fund is getting a little bit smaller, so the more that you put in terms of what you could spend capital funds on in a smaller bucket, while you're at the same time making the other bucket larger where this would clearly be covered, there didn't seem to be a good middle ground, at least that I was able to come up with this draft to kind of create that offset.
Okay. Let me go back to my original point. I don't know what week it was. Anyway, our capital funds from when they were instituted in 2009 have grown from $200,000 award to $1 million award, generated and directed through engineering. Okay. So it's grown 5 times, just not through the alderman's office. Our budget for enhancement, community enhancement, has grown 0%. So from 200,000 to $1 million, 25,000 forever. So if we want capital projects to be done, and we do, they can be done either through us or engineering. And be it $1,037,500 capital-wise in your ward versus 37.5 community enhancement, that is where we're at right now. Everyone on this dais had over 900,000. I just say million, over 900,000. I think, but you, right? You had a little bit less. Anyway, it wasn't your fault. So definitely the capital, streets, sidewalks, bike paths, those things have grown from 200,000 to $1 million in all the wards up here. So that was factored into the writing of this, at least by me, that the 37.5 was necessary now to the growth that we've had in community enhancement, the expenditures that we had, even say, you came on board, what, 5 years ago? 6, okay. So the expenditure 6 years ago for community enhancement, they've, I don't want to say they've doubled, but almost doubled. Yeah, probably, yeah, oh yeah, it probably has.
Printing, maybe not double, but pretty close.
Right. So the ability to get our capital projects done is still there, be it through our 37.5 or the $1 million that we
Over the years.
do with engineering. So definitely the intent was for the mailer, the full mailer, the printing, the postage. I mean, I can break it all down because I did it in my head. You know, if you do a mailer and you do whatever else, support your high school 10K, and you're a sponsor for your high school 10K or whatever. And those things, the 37.5 was the number that we came 50-50 to include those types of things, and that was going to hopefully be enough of a fund to do that.
Okay.
While we were still doing our capital on the other side. So that was the intent when it was written, that the mailers, the full mailer, printing and postage would be included.
It needs to be included in there, and I appreciate that you caught that, because I did not catch, when I just looked at mailing, I was just like mailer, the whole shebang, but as you read this, it's just postage, so if we're going to limit it to just one, it needs to be, the entire mailer needs to be put in that cost, or we take the one out, one or the other.
Yeah, I would suggest the first one, because I really, at this time right now, I don't know anyone who does more than one full mailer.
I don't, because of the cost.
Right, exactly. And I can't conjecture for the 12 of us. I don't foresee anyone going to 2 full mailers, but, well, somebody might want that, I don't know.
Postage and printing, so let's just change it to postage and printing.
I would support that, yes. Anything else, Alderman Bug? Alderman Franklin?
I'm listening to what everybody's saying here, and I think the fact that we're pretty good with the one mailer, that I don't think it's a big jump to put the printing of that, and the postage, because we're doing one. I think if we were at unlimited, I think, yeah, we have to talk about that some more, but I think if we're gonna go one, I think it would be okay to do both for that. And then again, we're gonna critique this when the year's over and see if there's any flaws or things we need to massage. But I think that's a fair thing, because it's one.
I would agree. Alderman Barrero, any questions, comments?
No, just that I'm trying to plan ahead, and I'm restricted to only going till April, so.
That's true, good point.
So I can't really plan for a full year, but these changes do help, to be able to be more flexible and do more things.
So I will say this, like Attorney Veenstra said, we can sit on this for a couple of weeks, have him answer what we talked about, or are we able to do, would it be an amendment to answer those two things?
If the committee wanted just to direct me to have this for the next COW meeting, I could have that with those changes.
I'm comfortable with that. Does everybody else have the consensus with that, adding?
You mean tonight?
No,
No.
this meeting set, well, you could give this at a committee report, as part of the committee report, and,
That was our intent in finance.
Okay.
Because we did it here, we did it in finance, and actually the majority of the sports, it's both.
Sure.
And then we said in finance that we would bring it here with both the 50%,
Okay.
which is the finance side, and the verbiage, which is the rap side, to go to COW tonight.
What I would recommend then is if you included that, Mr. Chairman, as part of your report, with the direction that the limitation be increased to the mailers, both on the mailers to include printing, postage, and production. And then also with respect to the refuse events, essentially to specifically including shredding.
That's right.
We could put that on, ask it to be put on as, we'll call it new business at City Council in 2 weeks, as it wouldn't technically be reported out as committee of the whole substantively, because it's not on the agenda.
So it would be new business tonight if we had an agreement here to,
What I would recommend is discuss this as part of your report, and that it's the feeling of, and Chairman Franco, you could certainly chime in at that point, that it was the consensus of both the RAP committee as well as the Finance Committee that this be acted on by the City Council, and would recommend that this go on as new business at the City Council meeting on the 28th.
I do have another question on this.
I just clarify, so it'll be on next week's
City Council.
as new business, so.
Discuss it tonight as part of your report is my recommendation, and then ask that it be placed on as new business because it technically hasn't gone through COW substantively.
I'm comfortable with that, everybody, consensus with that, so Alderman Smith?
Yeah, can I ask my question?
Sure.
So on page 4, line 5, it says the wards represented by the alderman through a competitive program intended to facilitate. Okay, can you explain competitive, in what occasion would competitive be necessary? Is this if we are doing a full project, if we're funding a full project? What if we're not funding a full project?
If you're doing a grant program and you have a grant program, that's what it is. It's not necessarily the city
That's already in
paying-
our grant program.
Exactly. It's not the city putting in a sidewalk or replacing a sidewalk at the
Okay.
alderperson's request.
And it's not you coordinating something with the community. It's, yeah,
This-
it's,
this-
it's in our grant programs now. I believe it has to be in our
This
grant
is-
programs.
exactly, so-
For you guys.
Exactly. So you don't have, yeah.
Okay,
So
all right.
the,
Thank you.
the one thing I would recommend, and again, it's not part of this, but I would encourage the RAP committee and to think about where there might be some economies of scale that can be achieved through centralized purchasing of some of these things, like, for example, the printing and the mailing, to see whether or not one vendor could be selected through a competitive process that would be used to do all the printing for the aldermen. That may work out a better pricing per individual mailing than, 12 different individual aldermen working with a different print shop each time.
And
Our chief of staff is in here?
Yes.
Yeah, did he hear that?
we had talked about that, I think, the last time as well, too, but, yeah.
Nap's over.
Whether it was printing or shred events and what have you and stuff, so.
Exactly, wherever possible, if there's a way of achieving economies of scale. I know these have always been treated as 10 or 12 different individual items, but the more that could be done as a bulk purchase or off of the city contract that's already there, the better that might result in terms of savings. And that may make those
Definitely make
funds
note
go
of
a little
that,
bit
yeah,
further.
tonight at COW. Discuss that as well, too, so.
May I ask the chief of staff, where do most of us get our newsletters printed? I thought everybody but you got them locally.
I don't go there, I go to my guy.
Yeah, I don't think he's any cheaper.
Rich Jacobs, Chief of Staff, Fast Print.
Everybody but,
Not everybody, but
in general.
the majority is at Fast Print.
So maybe we can work with them to say I know,
The
yeah.
things we have to bear in mind is how quickly you want it printed,
Mhm,
how many changes you make after so many
mhm.
drafts. I mean, that all costs and stuff. If we can keep to a tight deadline and a lot of lead time, however we define that, will help keep costs down.
You saying aldermen wait till the last minute on things? No way.
I'm not saying anything at all remotely close to that.
No, just when it's done, and it's got to go through multiple changes through the process. And then when they put it together, they don't I'm speaking from experience, they don't necessarily put it together the way you want it put together, so then you got to go back and get it redone again. Not necessarily the alderman's fault, but it's the formatting fault of the way they formatted it. So there is some back and forth in that, but I can't imagine you don't go through that.
Well, my guy's been doing it for 8 years now, and it's rock solid. I set it in and boom, it's done.
Well, then
Because
why
they have the whole thing.
Why can't Fast Print do that then?
You have to commit to having a template.
Yeah.
If you like the way a newsletter
Oh, you
look
have a
like,
template.
Yeah.
then we can follow that same
Ah.
thing, and it'll make things very, very much easier instead of having to
Easier or
Design.
cheaper?
would
Well,
say
I
both.
don't work for Fast Print. I don't know how to answer that, but I would assume cheaper.
Okay.
Well, can I say something on that? Because, the guy that I use is a Fifth Ward resident. He had a printing company in Aurora, so I went local. Now, I don't know what it would have cost other people, but I was factoring those things we like to factor in, shop local, and give it to business that people who are in town. So that's kind of what I did. So I don't know if he's much cheaper. Seems like he's very fair based on what you're saying. But I did it for other reasons. So I still think that needs to be in the mix where, yeah, this might cost a little bit less, but this guy does a great job and he's local. I mean, that type of thing. So I don't want to pigeonhole us to say cheap is always going to be the way to go, because cheap may not be the best price. So I just want everybody to know that there's other factors. That's all.
Let me chime in. There's a major factor, at least on the east side, is we not only, when we started, it was just 60504. That was our whole zip code. Of course, we went to multiple zip codes. However, our city is divided into a section that has a different name with a different zip code. So if you take your mailer to the Aurora station and it goes out, it doesn't go out. It has to be distributed back through because of the sections in Ward 9 and Ward 8 that say Naperville zip code, and they get delayed. And your predecessor found that out, and I found that out. They get way delayed.
Oh, you just don't know how to talk to people.
Pardon? Anyway,
Mine don't get delayed.
yeah. So there are certain printing companies who know how to deal with the different post offices and are aware of that, and there are certain printing companies that are not aware of it.
Who do you
And,
use?
I used Fast Print the last couple of years, but then
No, you don't have to say anymore.
last year was not as excellent as in the past. Let me just put it that way.
So with that being said, then, so we'll discuss that at COW and walk this on as a new item, or not, but have it presented, city council as a new item. Yeah, or new business, I'm sorry.
Do you want to take a motion to recommend approval
Yeah.
to the city council with respect to this item, with the addition of the shred events, and then with the modification that one mailer, and the mailer includes production, printing, and postage?
Yeah, so the two modifications that add the word shred, and then printing.
Production,
Production and, printing, production, and postage.
3 Ps.
Yeah.
I,
three
I,
Ps, yeah.
I make a motion based on the verbiage we just heard.
And I second that verbiage we just heard.
So I had a motion from Alderman Franco, second by Alderman Smith. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? All right, thank you. Thank you, Attorney Beechler. So, next item on the agenda, 25-0042, a resolution authorizing the reappointment of Margaret Stokes and Josh Harris to the Bicycle Pedestrian and Transit Advisory Board.
So moved.
Good afternoon. Sylvia with the mayor's office. We have both reappointments. Margaret is on her second term and Josh is on his third term. There would be no vacancies after these two appointments.
Any questions or comments from the committee?
Yes, are there any Ward 1 residents? on
I
this?
can check, hold on one second. There is not at this time.
In that vein, on this one, can we get the breakdown for COW of the wards for
Of the
this?
wards. Sure.
Because I think my rep, I think he stepped down. I don't think he's on this anymore.
Hold it.
Any other questions or comments? I had a motion by Alderman Smith,
Second.
and a second by Alderman Franco. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Item carries 5-0. Next item on the agenda, resolution approving the reappointment of Meredith Lindgren to the city's
moved.
advisory commission and for disabilities. So, any questions or comments from the committee?
Does this have a Ward 1 resident?
Could we have the same breakdown for all
Sure.
of these?
Yeah, that would be helpful.
Yeah, that would be good for all of these, actually.
Any other questions or comments? I had a motion by, was Alderman Bug, second by Alderman Smith. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Item carries 5-0. Next item on the agenda, 25-0055, a resolution authorizing the reappointment of Michael Pegasus to the Innovation and Technology Advisory Commission.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or comments from the committee? And a motion by Alderman Smith, second by Alderman Franco. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Item carries 5-0. Next item on the agenda, 25-0057, a resolution authorizing the reappointment of 8 members to the tree board.
Okay, why are these names not written on here? The eight members. I don't mean to say it in that light. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say it that rudely.
I'm not sure why there was no breakdown. I can double check and see. They're all city employees, pretty much all of them except for two. We
And
have
they're
a-
in the
They're in the
packet, but
packet.
just not, okay.
Yeah, for future
Any
reference.
additional questions or
So
comments?
moved.
Second.
And a motion by Alderman Franco, second by Alderman Smith. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Item carries 5-0. Next item on the agenda, 25-0060, a resolution authorizing the 2025 Ward Neighborhood Cleanup and Shred events in all
So
wards
moved.
in the city of Aurora.
Second.
Any questions or comments from the committee?
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
So this is easy for this, but when we go to the appropriation of funds through one of the accounts, those, if it's non-capital, don't we have to look at these to make sure they're gonna fall into the capital bucket? Because if it has nothing to do with infrastructure or any of the things we talked about, new things we talked about in the capital bucket, wouldn't that be exempt from using non-capital funds?
Wait, it says right in here, shredding and,
No, but it's,
Yeah, these are just cleanups and shreds.
okay, all
Yeah.
right. That's right, I'm sorry. I
Yeah.
was thinking, I was going one step beyond that. Okay, that's fine. We'll deal with that later.
Any other questions or comments here? Motion by Alderman Smith, second by Alderman Franco. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Item carries 5-0. Next item on the agenda, 25-0067, a resolution approving the reappointment of Nelson Santos, William Kerwin, and Roderick Young to the Aurora Airport Advisory Board.
So moved.
second.
Any questions or comments from the committee? Motion by Alderman Franco, second by Alderman Smith. All in favor?
Aye.
All-
Chairman,
Yes.
I do have a question, if
Sure.
this isn't the appropriate moment. And I wrote in my iPad the question, I didn't put it on my paper, and it's back on the tree board. You have Bill Chinetti. I thought he retired off the tree board.
He did. So we have two representatives that are Aurora residents, for the one for the west side and one for the east side. So Bill Chinetti is the east side resident on the board, and then on the west side, we have Nick Day, who is a representative for the west. So those two are the only ones that are not city employees.
So, but I thought Bill left the tree board. We did a
He has
retirement
been-
thing for him a while ago.
He left the city. He was the arborist for the city.
Thank you.
Yes.
For that clarification.
And so just to clarify, so for Resolution 25-0067, I had a motion by Alderman
Yes.
Franco and a second by Alderman
Sorry, I
Smith.
just need some clarification
Okay.
on that.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Item carries 5-0. Next item on the agenda, 25-0065, revised aldermen's policies.
Rich Jacobs again, Chief of Staff, Office of Alderman. The reason this is on today's agenda is we should be having this discussion concerning the office policies at the beginning of the calendar year anyway. There's, I'll tell you about the slight changes in the document, but by naming it the 2024-2025, since we just agreed to it a few weeks ago, is to dovetail with the cover memo to the alder people from Chris Minnick regarding travel expenses in the travel document. Previously in that cover memo, it referenced the 2019 and 2014 office policies, which we do not follow, are not current. So I wanted to strike that and insert this. Also, as always, in reviewing those old policies, one of them did dictate the wrong way for you all to travel, to figure out your mileage. It did state that you must factor it in from your home to the place of where you need to be for city business, as opposed to what is recommended in the Chris Minnick memo, either factored in from City Hall or wherever is the least distance, which could be your home, but only from your home if it's less distance than from City Hall. So this is just trying to clean up all of this so we're all on the same page. So when we look at something, it's referencing back to the correct office policy. And the changes there's only a couple of tweaks that I made. One is on the second bullet point. We're just asking all the alder people, and especially those with their ward committees, volunteers, advisors, when doing an event of yours, to, under the best circumstances and scenarios, that you utilize your volunteers to help pick up your supplies and food, and not wait at the last minute and expect staff to leave the office to go pick up supplies and pick up the food. It's just not working, as you can imagine.
And may I address that? Do you mind if I address that before you move on? to
Sure.
that particular item? just having to read that makes me crazy. There's not a single one of us that should be asking that staff next door to run out and pick things up for us. That's going a little bit too far. So I'm embarrassed that you even have to put that in writing. Shame on who's ever doing that, because you shouldn't, you and or your staff should not be running errands from aldermen. That's all I had to say. I apologize, but that really is so disrespectful from my perspective.
Thank you.
Now I'm drawing a blank. I think that was the biggest change for this discussion, so.
Let me go a step further on that. And, I mean, since it's here, I mean, it's not only for us, but as you being the chief of staff and you're over the staff, direction to them. So even when my aide asked me, do you want me to run to the Paramount and pick up tickets that you've purchased for the junior high kids, I was like, why would you even ask me that? That's my job. So I definitely would not. I mean, Paramount's right there. You will walk the Water Street Mall, you're there. But that's, my aide has work to do that you're giving her to do, not alderman work. So,
As you all know, we have a great staff who always tries to go above and beyond. I can't speak for the day that this happened, but I can totally see a beautiful summer day where we've been stuck in the office.
Okay.
And we're happy to run someplace close.
I did not want to state the obvious, but
yes,
that was
it
my
was not
thought
far,
process too, yeah.
but yeah, just the thought of,
Little pushbacks on days like today, maybe, but,
right,
yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
I
But
agree
Alderman
with
Bug, I was talking more
Alderwoman
about,
Smith's sentiment.
yeah, somebody
I just-
sending somebody to Target to do some shopping for them or to run out and buy things for them, not so much as, staff has gone to Fast Print for me and picked up something, so I guess I should be careful what how I speak is because they've done that for me as well, so.
Alderman Frankel?
I think we all realize, and we've seen in history, in local government and national government, we legislate to the lowest common denominator. And there's a number of bullet points in here, like, why is this even in here? Because there's always that person who we have to legislate to, but we bring everybody into the fold because that's what you do. You don't put them out there by themselves. You say, okay, this is what you have to do, but that's how it is. I read this and it's exactly what we're doing here, but it's necessary. It just is.
Unfortunately, I agree, it's necessary, and, it's, at least it's spelled out now, and everybody understands the rules and guidelines, and, we can continue to add to this if need be, or delete if need be, but I think this is a great document for everybody to reference, that's for sure. So, any other?
It's information only.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's information only, correct, so. Thank you very much, appreciate it.
Thank you, Rich, for everything you do.
So if there are no other items on that agenda, just onto the held agenda, I'm sorry.
Mr. Chairman, before you
Yeah.
adjourn, I did want to ask if we could go moving back to the aldermanic initiative item. I just wanted to confirm that the committee was okay with the concept that with respect to the refuse events, it was the funds would be used for paying the vendor to come in and do that and nothing else. So it was just the cost of bringing in the person, the entity with the shred truck, or bringing in the recycling people. That's what the funds would be used for, the capital funds. Anything else that would be considered a wraparound for that event would be non-capital funds, but specifically with respect to the actual vendor doing it, that's what the capital funds would be going for. I just wanted to make sure before we got to COW that everybody was okay with that.
That was my understanding, okay, yeah. Are you talking like food and drink or something like that, or?
Food and drinks, any sort of entertainment, that sort of thing, that would be, not part of
Yeah,
the.
again, I think back to your rule, lowest common denominator right there, so, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the held item, yes, so.
Yeah, and, I mean, not just the vendor, what they do, like, I have an event where they just drop the dumpster. The cost, the dumpster itself
Yeah.
Yes.
is my capital thing.
Exactly.
They don't stay,
The
just
cost
the
of-
dumpster stays.
The cost of hauling anything away, something along those lines, that would be okay, but everything else that would be ancillary to that would not be.
Yep.
You'd still use non-capital for that.
Thank you. Okay, first item on the held agenda, 24-0827, a resolution approving the reappointments of, I'm going to butcher these names, Gauza Wajid, Sirbani Bolkarain, and Sharon Garcia to the Indian American Community Outreach Advisory Board.
So we have the three, they're all three reappointments. Gausha is a second term, Sir Shervani is a second term, and Sharon is a fifth term. Gausha is a Ward 8 resident, Sirvani is a Ward 10 resident, and Sharon is a non-resident. After this, if these three are appointed, there are no vacancies open on the Indian American Board.
And then, any questions or comments? So, Alderman Smith?
So I'm the one that had asked this to be held, and the reason why I'd asked it to be held is because because they were reappointments, and I had been under the impression that there was a waiting list for this committee. And evidently, I'm wrong, that there was not a waiting list.
There is currently not a waiting list.
Okay.
We did get an application in December, but as of their reappointment date, there was no waiting list.
Okay, and that was why I held it, because I wanted to ask, and I went through the chairman, and he did the asking. What is the process, if there is a waiting list, and we have people being reappointed, and not for any names, because it has nothing to do for each of these specific people. Somebody's a reappointment for 8 times. Would we consider putting somebody on the waiting list in over them, or what would we do?
It all depends. We do ask about their, like if they come to the meetings or what their
Attendance.
current standing is with the board. So if their current standing is good, we don't hesitate to not say they can't be reappointed. Because they are all three of them are in good standing at this point. So we wouldn't look further unless they weren't in good standing.
Okay.
So, but in general, like you said, if there was a waiting list, if there was somebody currently on the board up for reappointment, and we saw that
They
haven't
don't
gone to a
attend
meeting like
meetings or
5
something.
years, is there that kind of thing?
Right, then we would remove them and approve
Yeah.
the person.
And that's something
on
that
the
you
wait
guys do
list.
before it gets to us, or is that?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. We would interview the new person that has a new application in, and if they do work for this board, then we would fit them in as an appointment.
Question.
Alderman Franco?
I didn't know exactly how this was gonna work. I know there's gotta be variables and stuff like that. But I'm just looking at bad scenarios. A bad scenario would be you had a good person out there, tries to get on a board. Everybody keeps reappointing. This person loses interest in the city of Aurora. And I'm just wondering how we could address, everybody was good. There's
Yeah.
nobody bad, so there's no reason to take somebody off. But you got a good one out there, wants to get involved, we can't get them in,
Hypothetically, yeah.
or her in. If we had limits on like, all right, if there's, if you're doing 4 terms, and I got somebody sitting here waiting,
Yeah.
you're kind of gone. 4 terms, but thank you for your 4. Something like, I didn't know if we had a mechanism
We
where we
don't.
can try to get as many people involved as possible.
Yeah, we don't. And then with the person that does apply, like say this person that applied in December, we do tend to see where she would fit in other boards. So if there's
okay.
other boards that are open and vacant and there's a ward, like her ward's not represented as much, we ask if they want to be part of a different board.
Okay.
So we don't just let them sit out
Yeah.
there. We kind of, ask them if they want to be part of a different board that's available.
That makes sense.
Okay. All right, I just
So-
wanted to make sure we're not turning good people away.
No,
Never
uh,
getting to do something I want to do for the city.
Yeah.
Okay.
So moved.
I just want to make a quick comment on.
Sure,
this.
Alderman
This
Brewer.
is one of the boards that has, heavy representation in DuPage County, or maybe, I don't know, maybe Will County as well. But on the King County side, there's not a lot of representation.
Yeah, and we've been
So-
trying to get people from that, from the east side in different wards, but a lot of people do tend to live on that side that represent this board.
So
So we-
that's
we're
why I'm
trying-
asking about Ward 1 residents, because I think there's
Yeah.
some people that want to get involved and just need to reach out to them.
Yeah, and if they, like I said, if they do apply for a specific board, we do tend to see where they fit in other boards. So we do recommend other boards to them.
So,
Because my understanding is we don't have a waiting list outside of the, I think, Hispanic Advisory
Heritage
Board.
Board,
Yeah,
correct.
I think that we have many vacancies open for
Correct.
various
And
boards, yeah,
Correct.
so.
the non-resident situation, would that have, again, not specific to a person, would that have bearing on if if you were a non-resident, you're on the board, and someone else was waiting and they are a resident, would that have some bearing on that? And I don't want to put you in a bad spot because you probably haven't gotten there because we don't have big waiting
Right.
lists on board, so you
Right,
don't have
so
to
it
answer
hasn't been
that.
talked about, but we can see about that and see what the result would be if it's a non-resident compared to a resident.
Yeah,
What that would
when it's an
look
issue, I
like.
guess maybe we can kind of see that or something, but hopefully we'll have that problem, but.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right, the good
Yeah.
problem to have, right?
Yeah.
All right.
Second.
Any other questions, comments? So, motion by Alderman Smith, second by Alderman Franco. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Item passes 4-0.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion by Alderman Smith, second
Second.
by Alderman Franco. This meeting is adjourned at 3:50 PM. Thank you.